Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Gallop Out. I'm your host, Ryan Anderson. Today, I get to be joined by the wonderful race caller over at Parx up in Pennsylvania. That's Jessica Paquette. How are you doing, Jessica?
I'm great. It's a wonderful, busy week here in Pennsylvania. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. I just moved into a new apartment and I only have half furniture. So we're doing our best with how we're doing things. Yeah, we're doing our best here. It's a great week to be in Pennsylvania and be a part of Pennsylvania racing.
Absolutely. We have the big Pennsylvania Derby weekend coming up, including the Grade 1 Pennsylvania Derby, the Grade 1 Cotillion, and I believe 11 total stakes on that card on Saturday.
Just a star-studded 14. There are 14 races total, ton of stakes races, a couple of graded stakes races, in addition to, of course, the two big $1 million Grade 1s. And the fields have come up super tough, kind of start to finish. I mean, starting the day with like a 12-horse maiden special weight, that'll get the announcer paying attention real early.
Absolutely. 14 races on the day. So that's obviously a lot going into that. And I do want to get into kind of how your career as a race caller and how you got into everything. But I guess just to start with that, how do you kind of prepare for a day kind of this big, as a race caller, having 14 races and so many big ones?
Stay hydrated. I don't want to diminish what a big day it is, but they are just they're races at the end of the day. And I kind of want to be as prepared for a bottom maiden claimer on a Tuesday as prepared as I am for the Pennsylvania Derby. So my preparations will remain largely the same. I usually color my notes a couple of days beforehand. I do jockey silks. And then once the horses go onto the track, I add things like blinkers, if they have red blinkers or a yellow bridle, I'll add color in my notes just for more visual help. Or if someone's in the house colors, which I do not love, I will change my coloring and then shame them as they go into the gate because I hate house. I hate house silks.
The house silks never make anything easy on you because how are you supposed to tell what horse is what and who the ownership group is? So I totally get that. Just to kind of start from the beginning, for those that don't know, how did you kind of get into the world of racing and then to eventually be a race caller?
So I got into racing as a horse crazy kid who didn't come from a horsey family. So, and I'm old. So keep in mind, this is like the early days of the internet. And there were a bunch of weird horse crazy kids on AOL message boards. This is before people knew the internet was unsafe, by the way. We had never met each other. We were just talking about horses and making fan clubs for our favorite racehorses. We were all very popular in high school, you can imagine. And this was back in like 1998, 1999. And Trudy McCaffrey, who owned Freehouse at the time, became aware of these kids who were fans. And she started an organization with John DeSantis called Kids to the Cup, which helped bring a bunch of kids who did not have any connection to racing except as fans to some of the biggest races in the country and introduced us to like behind the scenes of sport that we already loved, but then really loved. For so many of us, we were never going to do anything else after that. And the real testament to Trudy and Johnny D and Kate and Bradar and all of the folks that were generous with their time during this in the early 2000s. So many of us still work in the industry. This weekend at Parx, Emily Shields, who was part of Kids to the Cup with us, she now works for FanDuel and she'll be joining me at Parx. Susie Rasher is a photographer in New York. She was my best friend as a kid and still is my best friend. She'll be, it's just, it's so fun that we kind of all work in racing all across the country and still get to be friends that love the sport together.
Absolutely. It's really cool that you guys have all managed to stay connected through the years and all managed to stay in the industry that you guys are clearly all really passionate about.
And then as far as race calling, I flew real close to the sun and said yes to a bunch of things, and this is where it brought me. So in 2014, I called a race at Suffolk Downs as a one-off. I was not a prodigy by any means, but it was really fun and a great thrill, and I kind of thought at that time that it was just a one-time thing. Then quite a few years later, almost like 5 or 6 years later, I got the opportunity to call some quarter horse races as a fill-in at Sam Houston, and I just kept saying yes. And then when the job at Parx opened up, my response was, it's easy to second guess when such a big opportunity arises. Like I wasn't ready by any means. You're never ready. Right. But my mentality at that point was, why not me? So that has been kind of why not lead myself into this.
That's a great mentality to have. This past summer, I was able to intern kind of at the Del Mar Thoroughbred Club, and I was kind of in the same thing. Just like anything that kind of came across my way that was an opportunity, I was like, yes. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, just say yes. Yep. Yeah,
just keep saying yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's my plan too. So I'm happy that worked out for you. And then now you get to call one of the biggest racing weekends in the country. So that's got to be exciting.
It's a huge thrill. If you had told like little kid me on the AOL message boards that this is where horses would take me, it was beyond kind of even my wildest dreams.
Absolutely. Yeah. Can you share, obviously it sounds like there's more than one, but can you just share a memorable moment that kind of stands out to you that's had a significant impact on you and your career?
Oh, in racing, gosh, like in my entire career? Yeah, probably the one that just had the most impact was in May of, I'm going to do the math. I'm not going to do the math right. I'm not great at that. In May, 17 years ago, it was a rainy day at Suffolk Downs, and there was a first-time starter coming down the racetrack, heading towards the paddock, and it was like pouring. It was one of those miserable days where no one wants to be at the racetrack, and he didn't want to either. And there's this little bay horse just throwing an absolute tantrum. And I looked at that horse and I said, oh, that's going to be mine one day. And that was when I saw What a Trippy for the first time. And 17 years later, he is still my companion, my best friend. I've learned more from him about horsemanship than I ever even thought I knew. So that's the most memorable moment. That changed my life in a way that I never thought. It took a few years for me to get him after that, but I've had him for about 15 years now.
Very cool. Awesome.
And that's him. And he's back there.
Oh, that's him in the paintings there, or in the picture frames rather.
Nice. He's everywhere.
That's awesome. His name is Trippy.
What a Trippy.
What a Trippy. Oh,
what awesome. A Trippy.
It sounds like he had quite the day on that rainy day at Suffolk.
For
sure.
He was second. And I learned later, and I would always laugh about this, thinking back to it, he hates puddles. So he really hated that day.
I would imagine so. If he's not a fan of rain, that didn't sound like his kind of day. So it sounds like one of my other questions I had was if a particular horse kind of stands out, it feels like that would be the kind of clear answer is you saw him 17 years ago and he's now been yours for about 15 years, which is very cool. Just to kind of pivot into something that I find really interesting and motivating about you is you're one of the few women in a very male-dominated kind of industry. What's like a challenge that you faced, and how have you kind of overcome it?
There have been a lot of challenges for sure, and some days are harder than others. Where it does get a little bit frustrating sometimes, where some of the criticism that has been rendered my way is not necessarily performance-based. Sometimes it gets very deeply personal, and I don't mind constructive criticism. My skin's real thick, and I want to be not just good at this job, I want to be great at this job one day. So I kind of want to absorb all of the helpful feedback that I can get. But when there are entire Twitter accounts that seem dedicated to making jokes about the size of my forehead or some salacious ways I may have gotten my job, I noticed that my male counterparts don't get that sort of response on the internet. So that, you just learn to ignore it the best you can. The block button is your friend. That is not a sign of weakness. Making the internet a pleasant place for yourself is not a bad thing. That one took me a long time to learn. And that's been challenging. But Kate Scott, who's the voice of the Sixers here in Philly, said the most wonderful thing, and this has been something that is I've really kind of carried with me, is that the idea isn't just that we open the door and that we get through the door as kind of the first or the only or one of the whatever, but we have to hold the door for the girls coming behind us. And that's the mentality that I try to always remind myself. I'm here, that's great, but what really matters is, in 10 years, I hope there are more girls.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it sounds like, you have definitely the right attitude. And that is a really important sentiment that was passed along to you, is to hold the door open for others. And yeah, it's awesome, because I bet, you've inspired so many people that, maybe don't have a Twitter or an X account, but have been able to, hear your voice while they're at Parx or, anything like that. And I'm sure that's very big for them to hear that in a situation where, you typically hear a male's voice. I'm sure it's really empowering for them to hear a woman's, which is really special.
Well, representation really matters. You want to see yourself in a job. For me, when I was growing up, I saw myself in so many roles in racing, but I honestly didn't think a lady could be an announcer, because I didn't see that. And many of my peers, they grew up wanting to be an announcer because they were emulating the voices that they listened to growing up. I wasn't emulating any of them. I was chasing my stuffed animals around with a microphone, asking them questions, because that's what I saw people who looked like me doing. So it is you want to be what you can see. So I think it's really important to kind of show people that there's always a spot for you, no matter what you look like here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be really cool for, all the young girls growing up in the industry now. If they ever do want to be a race caller, they now have someone that they can go listen to, on a day-to-day basis. So that's got to be really special for them. Something else that you're really big on is you've been a big advocate for the safety of equine athletes, both during their racing career and then, of course, afterward. So I just want to gauge your thoughts on the current state of horse racing, and then just like in terms of the horse welfare, and then aftercare, Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, everything like that.
Well, I think that, as we learn better, we can do better. And we've made such tremendous strides in the time that I've been in the sport. The sport is so significantly safer than it was 20 something years ago when I started at Suffolk Downs, and the conversations around equine welfare, both during and after their racing conversations, have changed in such significant ways. One of the proudest things that happened during my career and my time at Suffolk Downs, we were the first track in the country to start and implement and enforce an anti-slaughter policy. And that was in the early days when that was still a really hard conversation that folks were kind of grappling with in the industry, is that was like a dirty little secret that was happening, and we needed to do better. So seeing the response and the tone that leadership set at Suffolk Downs, for me, kind of changed forever my mentality towards that, and the idea that we can make a difference and that it's important to keep trying to do better. I hope in 10 or 20 years we're further ahead than we are now, and that we're talking about like that we've made all of these strides and we can't believe what we used to do back in 2024, just like we look back to 20 years ago. Oh my God, we did that back then. For me as a horse person too, I look back at things I did with Trippy when we were early on in our training, that they came from a place of I didn't know any better, and the like bits I used or training methods I used, they weren't horrible, but I mean, I can be better than that, and I've learned to be better as I've gotten, you get a bigger worldview, and you understand that there are a lot of ways we can be kinder and do more for them because they are so generous to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do it kind of, not habitually, but they do it because, we kind of train them up that way. So it's only right that we pay it back to them for being such a rewarding and, being so selfless in that aspect.
And they all deserve it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No matter the level, no matter, what racetrack, everything, they're all exactly the same, and they all deserve the same treatment after their racing career as they get during it. Obviously, just to touch on this weekend again with some big races, you obviously have some really big names coming up for starters, the Greenwood Cup. You have the Marathon Superstar Next coming, who is in a field that I think drew 10 total runners, which was a bit surprising to me. I didn't think he was going to get that size of competition. And then, of course, you have the fabulous filly Torpedo Anna coming for the Cotillion Stakes. Do you have a horse you're most excited to see run at your racetrack up there?
I can't believe that I get to call Torpedo Anna, which is just so cool because she's a star, and as a fan, I'm excited to see her. I love the way Kenny McPeak has shared her with everybody this year. I think stuff like that is really good for the game. That's how you grow the game, is let people form a connection to these horses. So I'm super excited to see her. Next is my kind of racehorse, kind of this hard knocking type that runs forever. And he was so much fun to call last year when I wasn't, hyperventilating that I couldn't see in the rain. So at least he was white. He was in very far in front. So he does make it pretty easy for you. Frank Miramati's call of him at Saratoga was actually one of my favorite calls of the summer, in that it was, to me, a textbook example of how you make a race that is not really that exciting from a competitive standpoint or a big field. He made it so compelling. And that was one of those races where I kind of just sat and listened and was like, oh, he's so good at this.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I remember that call. I think there ended up only being 3 runners total that finished the race. And
it wasn't
won
great.
by basically a mile. But yeah, the way he called that race, it kept everybody engaged as if, it was a tight race. So there were a lot of it was called so beautifully that, I'm excited to see him run for sure. And then, the fact that Torpedo Anna is going to get up there, another big field for the Grade 1 Cotillion Stakes. And then you mentioned it, that Kenny McPeak has campaigned her kind of the right way, both, in terms of the horse's health, but then also posting all of her workouts on social media and, giving the fans a chance to get to know her more and being really transparent with everything. And that is how you grow the game. And that is, how you utilize a superstar like Torpedo Anna to, help grow more people or, grow the game and grow interest in it.
And uses social media in such a great way, like in a way to connect people, not divide them.
Absolutely. And then, of course, to end the day, or not end the day, because you guys have the park sprint, I think, is race number 14. But the 13th race is the Grade 1 Pennsylvania Derby, which drew a deep field of, I want to say, nine
11.
Total runners. 11 total
11.
runners, even better. With 9 to. It's gonna be a good day. You're gonna have to work hard on Saturday here for sure. But 11 total runners, headlined by Dragoon Guard, trained by Brad Cox, as the I want to say 9 to 5 morning line favorite. But that's a really deep and competitive field. Do you ever, when you look at a race like that, just to kind of get a gauge when you have to do the race calling, do you ever kind of go into the handicapping side of things so you can kind of anticipate where horses should be, or what's your approach in that sense?
So it's tricky because I have to handicap the races in between the races at Parx. I do the paddock commentary as well. So I have to have a semi-informed handicapping point of view. But as the announcer, I don't want to be kind of mentally locked into how I think the race is going to go. I think that's where, as an announcer, you can get yourself in a little bit of trouble if you're so stuck that like so-and-so has to be on the lead and then they're not. And then you're like, oh no, what has happened? And it's interesting, calling good horses is different than calling a different level of horses. Like Grade 1 stakes horses are going to run to form a lot more than, the $10,000 maiden claiming fillies. Going 2 turns, those can be a little bit less formable. And sometimes you don't really know what those horses are going to do. There's a reason they're, running at that level. But so it's interesting, whereas handicapping a race like this, you can kind of, unless something goes awry, you have a basic idea of where these horses are going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it is a lot better just from a consistency standpoint for those big races where you kind of know what and who is going to show up and where they're going to show up at. And they have, the form to run to. And it really comes down to just kind of telling the story of the race as it goes along. And then obviously, as they turn for home, that's where everything really picks up. I know you have a busy week, so I won't keep you for too much longer. I do want to ask, Pennsylvania breds are obviously a really strong breeding program, and they have a lot of really good horses. One of my favorites from a couple years ago was Chubwagon.
The full sister won today, finally.
Oh, what's the full sister's name? I must have missed that.
Chit Chat Chub. That's a tricky one. Yeah,
that's
one I have to enunciate real quickly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's great news, and what a coincidence that Full Civ won today. But I just want to see, do you have maybe a favorite Pennsylvania bred that you've been able to see run, at Parx?
Aoife's Magic by a country mile. So Aoife's Magic ran on Pennsylvania Derby last year in the pouring rain, and that was the first race where she kind of hinted that she might be pretty special. And I had so much fun calling a couple of her races after that. She's one who I've really, really enjoyed. Her trainer, David DiTolo, is a wonderful, wonderful man who dotes on this filly. She's getting a little bit of time off right now, but I hope she'll be back as a 4-year-old better than ever. Aoife's Magic is my favorite Pennsylvania bred, daughter of Smarty Jones too. And I am so old. I remember being at Belmont Park by the finish line watching Smarty lose the Belmont. That was one of the most memorable sporting moments of my life.
Absolutely, but it's got to be really cool to now see an offspring up at the track that you race call for, bred up in Pennsylvania, get to run and be so successful and dominant in doing so. It's
a wild full circle. It's very cool.
Absolutely. Well, Jessica, I can't thank you enough for your time. I love just getting to know a little bit more about you, how you got into the business, how you kind of prepare for a big race day, and then obviously talking about What a Trippy, the horse that was splashing around Suffolk Downs a few years, 17 years ago, and is now in your backyard, so it seems, and just getting to hear different memorable moments from the racing world, and as you became, the primary female race caller in the country, which is awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Best of luck this weekend. I know I'll leave you to prepare for all 14 races on Saturday, and then best of luck with the rest of your racing season, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.